School Committee at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, October 18th. And we'll begin just taking attendance, roll call. When I call your name, please state present. Ben.
Present.
Peter.
Present.
Irv.
Present.
And Allison present. And first up is, Jennifer, are you present?
I am present.
So first up is approval of minutes, and those were attached to our agenda item. Does anybody have any comments? Going once. And then I will move that we approve the minutes of September 20th, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Allison, seconded by Jennifer, and we'll take a roll call vote. Peter?
Peter, aye.
Allison, aye. Irv?
Irv, aye.
Jennifer?
Jennifer, I.
Ben?
Ben, abstain.
And the motion passes unanimously for, sorry, I guess that's not technically unanimous. 4-0 with one abstention.
Almost debatable.
I know, because technically abstain means you didn't vote, so it's a unanimous vote. Yeah. So next we have public comment, and we have one commenter, and let me just pull that up. And I will share my screen.
What the hell is this?
So that that comment in its entirety with the links is attached to the public comment item on our agenda tonight. And I'll just take this opportunity to just remind any folks watching from home that we welcome public comment in multiple formats at our school committee meetings. One is to record a voicemail message on our public comment phone line, which is 413-362-1891. And that number is included in the public comment item on our agendas every month. You also may email to scpubliccomment@arps.arps.org. Sorry. And we will display the email messages like I just did during the public comment period of the meeting. And then last, you are more than welcome to join our meetings if we're on Google Meet by joining the Google Meet and speaking live, or if we are in person by joining us in person and speaking at our meeting. So with that, I will move on to our next item, which is superintendent's update.
Allison, there might be some people in attendance who might want to.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I didn't notice the additional members. I need to expand my screen. Is there anybody present in the meeting that would like to offer a comment? Not hearing anybody. So with that, then we will now move on to the next item, which is our superintendent's update. So I'll turn that over to you, Mike.
Thank you. And so a couple things I want to start. Katie Richardson and town staff put on a fabulous Latino Heritage event on Saturday on the Common. I know I saw at least one school committee member there. Big turnout, lots of enjoyment, lots of music, lots of educational materials, and lots of arts and crafts materials for the kids as well. So thank you to Katie. Thank you for our town staff. We had a number of our staff attend as well in Kendrick Park, and it was outstanding and a great way to cap Latino Heritage Month, where there's been many events throughout all the schools. Open houses are now done at the elementary level, really positive feedback, packed houses. And, just want to thank all the staff members. It makes for a very long week for them when they're doing their teaching load and then preparing and connecting with families. And it's so important. And, heard from many families who are happy to be back in the building and being able to interact with their teacher in that way. And parent conferences are coming up. So Thursday and Friday of this week are early release days at the elementary level for parent conferences. Parents are given the option of coming in person or to do the conferences remotely. The other day is the afternoon of the curriculum day on November 8th. So families had a choice of what day and time worked well for them and also which format worked well for them as well. Speaking of that day on November 8th, we have our professional development day. Our keynote speaker will be Erica Buchanan Rivera, the author of multiple things, but also Identity Affirming Classrooms, a book that our leadership team read over the summer. Doreen and I have been meeting with her. We're really excited to see her. Not only is she going to do the keynote, but she's also going to do a breakout small group session afterwards. And like we have in past years, just a plethora of fantastic options for staff to choose, and many led by our own staff members on a variety of DEI topics. So looking forward to that morning. Principals also hard at work developing kind of process plans for school improvement plans. We had our school improvement plans done pre-COVID, sort of everything got adjusted, and this is a year to kind of renew and look at revising and rewriting the school improvement plans. And so they've submitted to me plans around engagement of staff, family, community members as well. And folks are getting started with that with their school councils. So exciting work. Had a meeting yesterday with folks who are working on the Crocker Farm Cubbies project. So that was a request that the school committee offered. And so they have some initial thoughts. I was on the call with Rupert and Derek Shea, Principal Shea. We offered some feedback. They're going to revise some of their kind of plans based on the feedback we received. It's going to be kind of tight whether we're able to get the report with the cost estimates in November, but certainly by December. We'll have that done. They're going to do the best they can to get that done in a month, but they also know that may or may not be possible. They'd rather have the quality and take the time as opposed to rushing it through at the end. But certainly by our December meeting of this body, we'll be able to present that with a cost estimate and design, and having some interesting discussion about sort of, do you move all the cubbies or only the cubbies that are reducing the size of the usable space of the classroom. And so really, really good, discussion. Appreciate the work that folks are doing, and Rupert's taking the lead on that. Starting next week and then extending, we're starting our ALICE training for staff. ALICE is an acronym, and it's the recommended safety protocol to plan for lockdown situations. At the elementary level, we do not do those drills with students, just to be really clear, but we want to make sure our staff are well prepared. We used to do this routinely. COVID, again, interrupted that, and getting back into that. Sergeant Lang is now the liaison to the ALICE training for the schools. I attended the middle school one, which was last week, and they're also were at the high school. Really well received by staff, who had a lot of excellent questions, and certainly school safety is something that is in our staff members' minds a lot, as well as our community, and having a real firm plan, as opposed to the old days where it was close the door, lock the door, and go to the corner. But this is a much more active response. It involves a lot more thinking, but it also both is evidence-based, but also, I think from the teacher point of view, makes people feel like they're taking proactive actions around safety instead of following a script that probably isn't in their best interest. So really appreciate the collaboration with the Amherst Police Department and Sergeant Lang to work with our faculty and staff. I think my last one is just a recognition that Mary Kiley, who's on this call, you may hear from her later. We talk about 6th grade, was invited by DESE's Federal Grants Program Office to be a presenter at their conference, their annual conference, which is next month. And it's really because of the thoughtful implementation, selection and implementation of the iReady program. So a big honor for Mary and well-deserved. So just want to congratulate her publicly for her work. And that is my update tonight, but I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. That's exciting to hear sort of yet again leaders in our school community, because Assistant Superintendent Doreen Cunningham recently was honored with an invitation to speak about the work in our district. So it's great to hear that another leader in our district is being recognized in that way. Any questions? I'll start. I have one. So I'm excited to hear that the work on the school improvement plans is restarting and getting going. What is there any sense for a sort of timing or hopes for when it's going to be completed, and when might the school committee hear about some of that work?
Sure. I mean, really any time is fine to hear about the work. And when we get to future planning, we can talk about it. But certainly the plan is, just for background, school improvement plans are part of, or multi-year school improvement plans are part of the expectation that we have in our state for schools. They end up being approved by the superintendent. We've had sometimes where they're presented for school committee, sometimes I haven't. I am not wed to any scenario by that at all. But the kind of what they've submitted to me are sort of the process plans. Who are they meeting with? When are they meeting? What topics are they meeting with? And all of those end up with a school improvement plan before the end of the school year. So we could certainly, it's one of their goals for the year, their professional goals for the year. And so sort of whenever seems like a good time to slot it in, we could get a process update of how it's going, or we could wait to the end of the year, really whatever the committee would like.
That's great. Yeah, I was thinking of it along the lines of sort of once they're more complete. I mean, I'd love to hear about the process too, just out of curiosity. But I think when we get to the end of the year and we're looking forward into setting, setting guidance for goals for the next school year, that information would be super helpful, I think, for the school committee to sort of understand sort of what each school building is thinking of in terms of school improvement plans. And that will, I think, be really helpful for setting goals. Any other questions? No? Okay. Then we can move on to a chair's update. I do not have any update this evening. So I'll move on to, one that when we get to future agenda planning would be helpful. I just want to note that I don't believe that we've landed on who is our representative for the MASC, or our delegate to the MASC conference. I know that one of our members is representing the regional school committee at that conference. And so I think just at either during future agenda planning or afterward, I think both Peter and Irv had expressed interest before. So we'll just need to figure out who is going, and if no one is going, then potentially empower our colleague to represent Amherst as well. So with that, are there school committee updates? Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to update people on the budget coordinating group meeting that we had. This is the first time we've met at the Amherst School Committee since the September 21st meeting of the budget coordinating group, which was the first for the school year that Allison and I attended. It was a good meeting. There were the three items of note. One is we discussed the possibility of changing the charter accounting to give you the real thumbnail sketch reminder. This was about do we stick with the current manner of accounting in which charter school costs and increases, decreases thereof are deducted or credited directly to the school budget, or should we switch to what most towns do, which is that comes out of the town budget and then guidance proceeds from there. So we had a good discussion. Some questions were asked, and in the end, most people were, in fact, I'd say I think everybody at the end was supportive of the idea of changing to where starting this upcoming fiscal year. So in this current budget process, we would change to where the charter costs are taken out of the town budget for the upcoming process. Sean Mangano, the finance director, mentioned it was a good year to do it in terms of the delta of the dollars. So Paul and Sean mentioned that that they could discuss that further at the used to be called the four boards meeting. So now the financial indicators meeting, which is last we heard scheduled for November 7th at 5:30, I believe, or maybe 6:30. Anyway, November 7th. So that's when that'll happen. That's when we usually get the first indication of what the guidance is for next year as well. They also shared with us, and I think this has been reported elsewhere, that the town is looking at a supplemental budget for this current fiscal year for FY22 for all departments. And at the elementary level, it works out to, well, at the time, the estimator would work out to about 125,000 added to our current FY22 budget. So that was obviously nice to hear and worthy of note. So that is all I have from that.
Any questions or any further updates? Seeing none. Okay, then we can move on to our first item, which is the enrollment report.
So this is something that we do annually in the fall. It was in the packet, so I apologize. It's probably a little hard to read. I'll see if I can make it a little bit larger. I think if I make it any larger, it'll start cutting off things. But preschool is just in orange because I don't include that in the overall averages, and it's a substantially separate program. But what you see is the number of classes and the average class size in every grade level in our 3 elementary schools, as well as the totals there. You can see that we're a shade under 1,000 students, and that we currently have 55 sections. Our class size mean is 18.1. That's reduced. We've generally been around 19 or 20 the last couple of years, but we've mostly maintained our number of sections, and the number of students has dropped a bit. I think, one asterisk for for 4 of the Fort River grades is the Comandantes program adds some complexity because it's not as interchangeable. The classes aren't as interchangeable as they are at the other schools or other grade levels, because we do have what's called Explorers classes, which are taught in English, and then our Comandantes classes, which are taught bilingually. So as opposed to other schools and grade levels, there's not the flexibility to go between those. And, I think at the current time, and for the next 3 years anyway, it'll lead to some, some occasional quirks in class size, and the numbers get a little complicated. I do want to note that in 4th grade at Fort River, we have had an influx of students. This is not about Comandantes, to be clear. Comandantes' highest grade level is currently 3rd grade. And so we have 50 students in that grade level. So that's above the class size guidelines. We did post for an additional position. I also want to be clear that we received significant feedback from parents, guardians in that grade level, many parents, guardians, advocating not to add a teacher, that they're really happy with their teacher and the quad size or the halvesy size is sufficient, that maybe some teachers need additional support, but they didn't think it was in the best interest of their child to transition to a new class. So we are still thinking about what we want to do there. Typically we would add a section, and that would be the process we'd have. We also have a space crunch at Fort River, so where that additional class would go is something that Tammy and I have spoken about. At the current time, our staff members are doing fabulous. One of those is a co-taught room, and there's ELL folks in there as well. So there are multiple adults in there, and the classes are 1,900 square feet. So in terms of literal space for kids, this is not a situation where we don't have like seats or desks, or the kids are not all clumped together. It's more kids than we'd want from an instructional perspective. And so at the current time, we're addressing it that way, but we still are considering, as we move forward, the best way to support this group of students. But overall, a class size of 18.1, a mean class size is quite admirable. That's in terms of, other than some very, very small rural schools, that's the lowest that I can see on the DESE website. You have to do a little work. It's not as clean and easy on the DESE website, but that's the lowest that I've seen in Western Massachusetts, at least in Hampshire, Franklin, and Hamden counties, again, with the exception of some really small schools that have some, leads to some unusual class sizes. And, I think what I would like to say, I'm happy to answer any questions on this particular report, but I think really important, something I talked to the chair about is I want to come back to this next month because what I really want to do is start looking at projections for next year with 6th grade not being there, because we see some pretty significant swings in terms of not just class size, but school size. One of the things we've noticed is Fort River, partially because of Commandant days, but not completely, has gotten significantly larger this year. It's the largest school by a large margin at this point, and that's a big change. And Wildwood and Crocker Farm are getting smaller. There are 71 Commandante students who are living in catchment areas at Crocker Farm and Wildwood. So again, that's a contributing factor, but it's not the only factor. There seems to be some other demographic shifts of where folks with kids are living in town that are also contributing to this. And to be very frank, we will have to talk about staffing changes to respond to this enrollment shift. We've done that in small measures, but this enrollment shift is significant enough where I would like to have that conversation next month in planning for both the 6th grade move, but really more focused on the K-5 the number of students that will be remaining in the K-5 schools, so that we start having very public conversations about that, because rightfully so, you'll hear more about the 6th grade move in a couple minutes, but there still be, lots and lots of students in our K-5 buildings that we want to make sure that we're being both, educationally and fiscally responsible about how we're approaching that, and also being equitable between the 3 schools. So more to come on that for next month. So I just wanted to do a little bit of a kind of preview of something, a continuation of the conversation. But in terms of this year, this is the current spread. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I think Allison was muted.
Sorry, I'm muted by accident. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the order that hands were raised, and Peter's was first.
So thank you for this. I appreciate you pointing out the how exceptional our small class size is. I think it's often taken for granted in town that that's just the way it is, but it's a huge investment of staff and of funding. And when we think about funding, that this is where the bulk of our funding goes is to staffing, and we do this because it's a community value, and it's in our policy that we have preferred class size ranges because we feel that it has the greatest impact, especially at the youngest grades. So this is a tremendous thing to be proud of in Amherst education, among many other things, obviously. But this is one of those core things that is just part and parcel to what makes our elementary schools so exceptional, in my view. The two quick questions I had. One was, I'm just looking at the kindergarten size at Wildwood of 22, which is slightly above the preferred range in the policy at 17 to 21. So just wondering if you've heard any feedback from parents or teachers at that grade level at that school about that size, and whether that's something you're monitoring. And then also when you say that we should take a look at the impact of the growing population at Fort River, do you mean in order to consider reducing the number of classes at one of the other schools and increasing the number of classes at Fort River, or are you talking about other kinds of policy changes?
Sure. So in regards to the first one, it's something that we are keeping a close eye on. And Nick and I I was over at Wildwood today. So far, so good there. We also have, I say this, what's not reflected in this document is that we sometimes have students who are rarely in class based on their special need, and they're part of a specialized program. And not that they don't count, they certainly count a tremendous amount in our schools. But I think there are many times during the day where the number of students actually in the class are significantly less than what's on the sheet, or at least somewhat less, I shouldn't say significantly. In regards to your second question, it's not so much number of sections that I want to talk about next month, but it's really just We've not adjusted our non-classroom staffing a lot, despite pretty significant swings in the number of students. And so I think because sixth grade's moving and because we've had this swing, I think we do need to sort of normalize that, because Fort River grows, we haven't necessarily, and I'll own this, grown the staffing to accommodate that. Like, at what point do we say, well, here's a reasonable ratio range? You're never going to get exactly, because we don't want decimals of people in multiple buildings if we can avoid it, right? But what's a reasonable range to acknowledge that there's been schools that have increased in number of students and schools that have decreased. And we want to make sure that no matter what school you're going to, you have access to the full range of resources. And so we sort of last year talked about it. We wanted to hold off because we knew there was going to be some significant shifts this year coming, to be planful about that, because we want to make sure that our students have the same access to the wonderful array of resources that our schools offer. And we can't do that if the staffing isn't aligned with the enrollment. Is that a fair answer? Fair enough? Okay.
And I'm looking at the queue, but I think because Irv, you spoke, I do recall, if Jennifer's okay, I saw that Irv's hand originally had been raised second. So Irv?
Yeah, Mike, thank you for that update. One of the things that I would like to have information on is the demographics for Fort River. Actually, for all of them, but especially for Fort River. If you could provide that to us, it would be helpful.
Absolutely. Probably I'll talk to IS staff, but the state publishes that probably in the next couple of weeks on their website, because we send them the October 1 count. So we should have that in short order. And I tend to prefer the DESE data, even though it comes from us, because it's organized and it'll be public data. So I will make a note to myself to check, and when that comes out, I'll share it with the committee immediately.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Thanks. So I agree that our small class sizes are something to be proud of and something that makes our school district stellar and unique. That said, I'm looking at, and that's why we have guidelines based on grades as to how big we would like our average class sizes to be. So I'm looking at cases where the average class size is actually below the recommended range. So for second and third grade in Wildwood, looks like we have, second grade is 3 classes times 15 students is 45, and our range is 19 to 23 for second and third grade. And similarly for third grade, we have about 46 students, and the recommendation is 19 to 23. You mentioned Fort River, 4th grade, Mike, but then the next one is 6th grade at Crocker Farm, has 47 students total, it looks like, and the recommended range is 20 to 24. So just like what can you tell us about being below the range?
Yeah, and I think it goes up both ways, right? On the ones that are above and below, is we also have to take into account the composition of kids, right? And so some grade levels, for lack of a better phrase, tend to get along really well, and the larger class size has less of an impact on the teaching and learning and social experience for kids. And other grade levels have more challenges that way. And so, some of this is based, into Irv's point, which I think was spot on the demographics of the kids, and not so much kind of things that come out in DESE reporting, but in terms of who the kids are, how they gel as a community, and what needs they have. And so we do make some judgments about, based on needs of kids, how to do that. Some of this is changes. So some of these numbers shifted from when we were planning last spring and we were identifying classes and placing kids. The Wildwood example is a good one, where there was a couple more kids in those grade levels last year, and as students, families move out of town, not always, we're trying to really limit our school choice to, as best we can, to kindergarten for a whole host of reasons. Some is a new building project, some is just trying to limit it. We find that when we offer kids a 6 or 7 year experience, choice students, that it tends to be a more positive experience for everyone involved. So we've been really cautious about not adding kids, knowing that the future is a little uncertain that way. And your point's well taken. And I think as budget times may get tight, we may have to have different decisions that make sure that we are closer to the top end of the school committee guidelines in exactly the way you said, so Some of it's hard to predict because we do have a fair amount of transiency in our school. At Wildwood in particular, we do have University Village, which was going in for what was used to be North Village. Well, many of those students who have come to us were prior Wildwood students who moved to other housing within the Wildwood zone. We do have at least a couple examples of students who moved there from Fort River and Fort River and Crocker Farm zone. So, we're also trying to be cautious about the impact. We'll know that impact better this spring. A fair number of families already in there, or residents already in there. And the sense I get from UMass is by April, they believe it'll be fully inhabited. And so that was just another unique part of this year at Wildwood, where we had some questions about the impact of pretty significant completion, the significant housing project completion. And so, those are the factors that go in, and the conversation that you brought up is what we talk about frequently. And we know that we're in this space that we may have to shift that over time. Financial pressures may force us to have slightly larger class sizes, more typical for our surrounding towns.
Thanks. I had a similar question, because I know we have a bottom end of our, and we focus on the top end of a range a lot, but not as much on the lower end. And small is not always smaller is not infinitely better. So in some cases, so thank you for that detailed response. Are there any other questions? Irv?
Just one other observation from a former elementary school teacher, me, that 2 kids can change a classroom tremendously and change what is needed and how it is needed in terms of the resources. A lot of people don't understand that when you're in a classroom, like a 3rd grade classroom, like I have been, you have new 2 or 3 new students come in and added to that classroom. That can change the entire composition of the classroom in terms of personalities, learning styles, etc., to where the teacher then has to make those kinds of adjustments. So when we just look at the numbers, that's only the first level of it. There are other levels of it need to be considered, and Mike was trying to get at that, I thought, in terms of where this all is.
Any other questions? So we'll come back to this at a future meeting when we're looking and talking about the impacts, looking into the future when we're moving 6th grade out of our buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could talk about future agenda planning, but I think I'd like to do that if possible at our next meeting, just
Okay.
because I do think it's a critical piece of the staffing of the 6th grade piece, right? All these things are dominoes that are dominoes, the wrong word, but they're all interrelated. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Okay.
I'll take this down.
So moving on, and I see our guests have joined us. Welcome. Thank you, Tim and Rick, for joining us. Next up is our building project update. And there's a deck as well as an additional point that is not included in the deck that we'll be talking about tonight. So I'll turn it over to Mike or Ben to kick us off.
I can cue it up if that's okay with Ben. Tim, you should be able to share your screen, or Rick, if you can't, then let me know with the presentation. I just want to start by, while they're queuing it up, to go backwards a little before we look at the slides. So the DNISCO folks and the building committee are doing tremendous amounts of work. And we've had these subcommittee meetings multiple times that have been in person and well attended by members of the public. And there's been an opportunity for exchanges of information that have been really helpful, looking at both the materials and design. We've shifted, as Tim will talk about, bus and transportation loops. And we had a meeting last, I want to say it was Friday, where we had, Ben was there as a school committee rep, although probably for multiple reasons, but we had really great representation from CREST, the fire department, the police department, the town staff, and folks from DNISCO and some security and safety consultants to take a look and gather feedback. I know we'll probably do that after the slide deck, do a little bit of questions that came out of there. But, really critical that our first responders, our ambulance folks were there as well as from the fire department, were able to weigh in and offer feedback on the safety of our school. I'm guessing Tim and Rick are having hard. Oh, no, Tim's got it. Perfect time. So I'll turn it over to Tim. I know Donna is going to hop on in 5 or 10 minutes when she gets back. But Tim and Rick are here from Danisco, and they can do a summary of where we're at as of tonight. But I want to thank the Danisco folks for making the time in the evening to come back and share this update with the Amherst School Committee.
Thanks, Mike. It did take me a minute to get the slide up, but I think we're working now, and we can jump right into the site plan that you were alluding to in your introduction and the recent developments that have, we think, simplified and improved the site. Not to say that there is not a bit more to do, but we are about half scrolled. If that, I just want to make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. It's just taking a second. Sorry for the technical difficulty. It's scrolling a bit slow.
And Tim, if you have any trouble, I can try to share it if you continue to have the tech problems. Hey, Donna, I didn't see you
Hey.
join.
Hi, everyone. Or I can, Mike, what we have is a video, the animations in this. So we probably don't want you, not that we don't want you sharing, but they won't be able to see the animations if you do this. So Tim, if you run into problems, give me a holler.
I am actually running into problems because I can only share a PDF in a tab view, and it will not scroll very fast.
All right, so let me see if I can. I'm pretty sure we've done this before, but
Should I do up?
yeah, let me see if I can.
You want me to take Tim's down so you can try to do
Yeah,
it?
I can take it down.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll have the same problem, but and it's opening. So there's a tab, a window, or my entire screen. Might have to share my entire screen. So with that said, please pardon my messy screen. It's like inviting you into my home, but I'll try to do it.
Did you have a question, Jennifer?
Yeah, just how would you like to handle questions about the presentation? Should we wait till the end or while you're doing it?
We can absolutely. Why don't we? I'm just trying to think of the easiest thing. We actually
Can I offer?
Yeah,
Can I
sure.
offer a suggestion?
Yes,
Can
yes. We don't have that many, so go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, why don't we go through all of the slides and then we can go back and sort of section by section take questions. But I just want to make sure we get through everything if we can. Does that work? I saw a thumbs up. Okay.
Thank you. So can everyone see the screen? Okay, we're going to give this a shot. So I apologize, I'm a couple minutes late, but what we just wanted to do tonight is just present to you where we currently are with the project. We are like super excited about how this is all coming together. What you're seeing here is our proposed site plan. We have worked with Guilford and Jason at the town level, with Ben and Rupert, Mike and his team on coming up with the ideal or the best solutions on site for drop off, pickup, parking, buses, vans, and then cars. So really quickly, I don't know if you can people see my mouse? Okay. So what we have done is we've actually separated parents and cars that will be coming in from the north part of the site and buses that will be entering from the southern entrance. Right now, how it works is you have everyone coming in from the south, scooping around the driveways and then exiting to the north. Just to familiarize everyone, if you can see a dotted building outline, that's the existing building. The new school will be built to the south of it, and then we'll have a park or drop-off area for buses, a dedicated bus drop-off to accommodate 12 buses, as well as to accommodate vans that require additional time for loading and unloading of students. They'll be able to drop off along this loop here, and they'll be able to enter the front entry, which you see by the yellow arrow here. And then we actually will have a separate entry to the middle of the building, but our goal is to promote and have everyone enter through the front of the building. The vans here will also be able to bring the students into the front of the building. And then to the north, we have parent drop-off or car vehicle drop-off. They will enter through the parking lot, and they will be able to stack, and then we could actually have them stack all the way or line up all the way to almost the curve of the drive and exit. And this should more than accommodate the number of cars that we believe 60 cars total at one time, based on the traffic studies that we've performed. We'll have approximately 170 parking spaces as required by the program. Our goal was to separate some of the handicap spaces so that we have people that want to come into the building, but we've also located, and this is still not finalized, but thinking that some handicap spots for folks that maybe are here on weekends or want to go to the fields, that they can park closer to the fields. We have the school, which I believe most people have seen. We'll get into the actual insides and the program components, but we'll have a main entrance at the very front. The community wing still remains at the front with the gymnasium across the hall from the cafeteria. The cafeteria will be able to utilize the play area for recess before or after lunch. We are developing areas so that the students can actually eat outside. We're seeing what a popular and wonderful opportunity that is. We will have nature trails, outdoor learning opportunities, both to the northeast of the school and also southeast of the school. The site plan hasn't been 100% defined yet or confirmed. These are where we currently are. We have basketball courts to the rear of the building. We'll also be adding a couple of more basketball closer to the play areas as well. And right now we've identified quite a bit of play fields to the north. And we're still refining this. We have to have further conversations both with Park and Rec and the soccer and everyone else to make sure that we're able to maximize the fields as well as what the users would like to see there. So this is where we're currently at as it relates to the site plan. And here's just a more zoomed in area. What we did determine, and we're really excited about, is that we had identified some boundaries, floodplain and wetland boundaries. And what we have confirmed with the conservation agent is that we actually were able to bring the driveway south because the wetland boundary actually didn't go as far north as we had thought. So this actually enables us to bring the building and everything further south of the existing building. So even during construction, there's a much larger separation of the activities of the school and the construction, but it also allows us to really start enhancing and taking advantage of the site to the north of the building. So as we enter the school, I just want to give everyone an update. Hopefully it looks very familiar to where we all left off. We will be entering the building to the west, and here's the vestibule. It will be a double vestibule, a secure vestibule. People will have to be buzzed in at the main entry. There'll be a security transaction point within the vestibule. Once credentials are checked, everyone will be able to then enter in. They'll be buzzed in to enter into the building. This will be the administration wing. It says ETL, but it's also the assistant principals, the conference room. The principal will be here. The 4 staff to support the principal and assistant principals will also be located here. We'll have a nurse's suite located in the same areas so that if the nurse has to leave, that they have supervision from the other folks that are within that suite. We will have the cafeteria or cafetorium with a stage, and adjacent to that is the music room with practice rooms, and these could actually be used as green rooms that will have access to the stage from behind. So they'll actually be able to be used during performances as well. And across the hall is the gymnasium. We have a main stair in the community wing, as we'll call it, that can be locked off for after school use, for community use, and we don't want people going upstairs, but otherwise it will be open for students to go upstairs during the day. We have an elevator located kind of right in the middle of the academic and the community wing. We have a large area to support our storage receiving area, custodial workshop, trash recycling in this location with dumpsters, and we'll continue to refine this, but we've had great conversations with Rupert and Ben on the flow and how receiving and deliveries are made. So we have bathrooms, multi-stall bathrooms located in this area so that when the community is using these spaces that they'll have access to bathrooms. And we also have a staff or a single stall bathroom here as well. And then we'll be able to close off the academic wing as well during community use or non-school use hours so that the cafeteria and the gym can be fully utilized without the community wandering through the entire building. The purple is really our academic wing, 5 classrooms per grade. This should hopefully look very similar to where we left off with you all, with clusters of 3 classrooms around a project area for project-based learning, for collaborative teaching, as well as for individual or small group instruction in these areas. We have 2 grades per floor. So on the first floor is kindergarten because they are slightly larger than all the other grades 1 through 5. Each kindergarten will have a toilet. And then all the other grades will be designed to be exactly the same, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And we've integrated all of the special ed programs, as you can see, so that they're integrated as part of the educational program. Going up to the 2nd floor, the building's going to start, and I'll have Tim show you what this really means visually, but you can see there's a outline next to the media center, and that is actually the roof of the 1st floor. So it's going to start looking like a cake. We're going to start stepping back as those floors start, as we start going up. Above the cafeteria is going to be the media center, and across the hall is just going to be the 2nd floor of the 2-story volume for the gymnasium. We've created a STEM or STEAM area here with the art and the science, technology, engineering room will be located in this vicinity. We have a teacher workroom and staff dining located in this vicinity. And then again, we have, you'll see it's going to look very repetitive, the academic spaces to the east. And then on the 3rd floor, again, very similar, we'll have a teacher workroom and staff dining located in the vicinity of the classroom wing with literacy, a professional center, and also a literacy specialist area. So very simple, very compact floor plan. We really appreciate all of the input from MSBA. They really helped us make this just that much stronger, but working really closely with Mike Morris, his team, and the principal and the special ed folks, it's been a wonderful experience, and we think that this is going to be an amazing facility for your students. Tim, I'll turn it over to you. I can still advance, but I'll let you talk to these.
Sure. We've heard from the very beginning of the process that daylighting is very important to Amherst and the community and educators alike. And we just want to review some of the presentations that we've done and the discussions we've had about bringing that into the building and why daylighting and views are so important. There is a lot of studies, almost too many to mention, that document all of the health and performance benefits that students have from amply lit and well lit spaces. Next. The effects on health in terms of sleeping, a better body clock management. There are effects on performance in test scores. There are effects on recovery from stressful experiences. There are no ways to say that it's just better every way to have a well-lit performing space with ample daylight that is controlled. So as we design the building and we create opportunities for light to come in, we want one, ample light. Two, we want to be able to see out so that students and occupants can have a connection to nature and the outside of the site. And we want to make sure that the light comes in and controlled. Too much light, it can be uncomfortable, and we don't want to create glare on work surfaces where students are trying to learn and teachers are trying to teach. So here's just a summary of the ways that lights have to be controlled. We have to make sure that there's enough. We have to make sure that it comes from the right places. And then when it comes in directly, the glare between the direct sunlight and other ambient light in the surface, the contrast is too much. And then always we have to have the view so that you have that connection to the outside. And then as you intuitively know, direct sunlight has a thermal experience. So in the winter, it might be comforting, but in the summer, it can be a bit much. So we just want to make sure that we have all of that under control with the openings and the windows that we have in the classrooms and the other spaces of the building. And here, we're going to start to move around the outside of the building to show you how that design is coming together. This is the view as you approach the building through the parking lot towards the front entrance. This would be the parents drop off. You can see the glass lobby and the front entrance marked by the canopy. The administration suite is to your right there. As we circle around the building to the fields to the north, you can see the cafeteria, which is the large glassy volume toward the center of the building, and the library above it on the second floor. The site is very good for the building in the fact that we can orient all of the classrooms north and south, which is the ideal orientation for the classrooms. We can take the other large education and student occupied spaces and orient them so that they're facing north, which is great for controlling glare and allows the connection to the site. And much of the activity, outdoor play, outdoor learning will be to the north so that those spaces are spacing that direction. As we move around to the east, we continue with more outdoor play. This is where the basketball courts are. There's a stair at the end of the building. Moving around the south, you can see the rhythm of the fenestration in the classrooms. And on the south side, because you have the direct solar gain, we're showing exterior sunshades to control the glare. Here we get to the second main entrance for the building, where students who take the bus to school will go in and be able to go directly to their classroom or up the stairs to the classrooms, and circling around to a gym with a gym entrance and back to the front door. We're also starting to look at what the inside of the building can be. The same sensitivity to light and daylit spaces we are bringing inside. As you walk in the front door, you can see the administration offices through that secure vestibule that Anna talked about. And as we get deeper into the lobby, there are connections to the main spaces that will be used by the public as well as the students here. You can see into the gym to the south and the cafeteria to the north, which we imagine being quite open. And so you can see through to the playground to the north of the building. The lobby will have vibrant colors and clear story windows to make sure that it's always light filled with durable materials that recall natural materials. And this will be the vibrant center of the school. Here we're just going into one of the classrooms, the music room, that will be off the lobby. I don't know if you want to go back to the schedules on or.
Yeah, so just, we have spent, before we go here, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to go backwards now, but we've really had probably just over the past maybe 6 weeks, Mike, working sessions to start talking about and selecting the exterior materials, to start talking about the form of the building. And we're really excited about how this is all really coming together. We've just started last Friday talking about the interior and the interior materials and the direction that that's going. You'll see some things that, we do not have both dual language signage, and we recognize that's important. So you're seeing just the beginning of, as we start to pull together the interior colors and finishes, and this will be ongoing as we go through schematic design, but even beyond this. So this is sort of the beginning, and we're really excited to be able to walk you all through the school as we start developing it. And then, oh, I didn't mean to do that, but lastly, just to give everyone where we are right now, we will be submitting our cost estimate drawings December 1st to the cost estimators. We'll have a total cost estimate prior to January 6th to make sure that our cost estimates and what we're designing is still in line with where we were when we submitted our preferred schematic report. January 13th, there is to be a vote of the Elementary School Building Committee to accept the submission, or more so the costs of the project. And if we need to have another meeting, we would be doing that on January 20th. We will be presenting a town council presentation on the cost estimates January 23rd, with a vote for town council for February 6th. We'll be submitting to MSBA on March 2nd, and the vote of the MSBA board will occur on May 26th. And I believe that the debt exclusion vote is tentatively or is scheduled for May 2nd. So we actually did push schematic design out a couple of months because we felt it was really important to have time for community engagement. We were lining this up when we found out MSBA wanted our submission by December 28th. It just was not enough time to have community input and refine the design the way we really wanted to because of the holidays. So this does not change the start of construction or the completion of construction. So we are still on schedule to start in around June, July of 24, with the completion for students' occupancy in September of 2026. So that is all I have.
Thank you. That was think that the animated tour of the school
Yeah.
building was just was awesome. So really appreciate that, having that opportunity to sort of feel what it would be like to be walking through that building. So I have questions, but I'm going to let my colleagues go first. And I see several hands. I'm going to open the queue. Oh, I guess one hand went down. So Jennifer.
Jennifer, you're muted.
Thank you. Can we look at slide 2? So I guess I have questions or concerns about the north entry for parents and cars. I drive on Southeast Street from South Amherst to UMass every day. And if I hit it at the right time, or rather at the wrong time, there's lots of cars exiting Fort River there, wanting to turn right to get out, wanting to turn left to head south. And it can get really backed up. And I also can imagine cars coming from the north trying to turn left to enter, backing up into the intersection between Southeast and Main Street, which is just off this. So like what work has been done or is going to be done, or like about that intersection and safety and congestion and traffic? And it just seems like there's a lot, there could be a lot going on in that spot.
Mike, do you want me to speak to it? You want to take it?
I can start. Yeah. So I think, and Rupert's not here, but I think there's been a lot of feedback given by Rupert to the town to look at beyond the entrant exit, but just other things on Southeast Street, both referring to the little cut through behind the bank as being something that, you know, I know Rupert has really strong feelings about, and shared that with the town, as well as potential widening on Southeast Street. So we've shared that feedback with the town and the town engineers. At this point, they're considering what they want to do, and this is where it gets, it's not the school property on Southeast Street. So the best we can do is offer feedback to DPW and the town on that, and the town engineers. As it relates to the specific question you asked about the entrance exit, I will say that we had conversations, not just with Rupert, but also with people who drive buses for us. And they felt really strongly that the separation of buses and cars was the most important thing. I think you're right to note about the impact on Southeast Street is something to be aware of. You know, for the most part, buses and vans come and go, not exactly at the same time as cars, especially as more of our families are using buses, and the number of people doing car drop-offs has reduced. But from a safety of kids aspect, the bus drivers, the principal, everyone was resolute that this was the most important thing. Was if it backed up traffic, not great, but that they had major concerns about the current model. I mean, this actually made us, I'll be blunt, say like, well, what could we do now, right? We still have 3 years of this school, you know, and it's hard to retrofit some of, you know, what's in this design. I will say also that first responders and public safety also felt like this was really important from their perspective as well as the town engineer. So I think you're right to say that there's unresolved aspects on the Southeast Street piece that I know the architects, your traffic consultant weighed in on. I know our folks have weighed in on, and the town has to consider how they can improve that situation. But what I heard from them is they didn't feel like the separation of buses and cars was going to contribute greatly to that. It was going to be an issue one way or the other, and at least this way it separates buses and cars and vans. But you know, you're right to note that, and if Rupert was here, he would give you a more impassionate viewpoint and more informed about his ideas about Southeast Street, and then the interchange behind it, which is loosely on this road from Belchertown Road onto Southeast Street. And so the town is going to have to consider those and potentially take action in the next 3 years.
Yeah, I will say, you know, for one, that section of Southeast Street has always been awful before, and will be, and will continue to be. So, you know, we talked about that when we were selecting the site, but I think, you know, it's independent of the school project. I think that it's just a bad stretch at certain times of the day. I, for one, having had kids that went through Fort River, they took the bus, but on days when they missed the bus or we had to, for whatever reasons, had to bring them into school, that drop off experience, as smooth as it might have been from a perspective, it just always struck me as super chaotic and super risky and potentially dangerous because of also not just the kids being dropped off, but the mix and different flows of traffic, buses having to go straight, cars having to cut across the bus lane. It just, so I applaud this solution because I think that's going to make it a lot smoother. And then my second thought is, and I mentioned this when we were talking about electric buses, but also how can we encourage and incentivize more parents and more families to use buses so that we're not having to build a line for 60 cars to queue up twice a day? Because that, in my, that would be ideal in my mind, both from a traffic relief perspective, but also from a climate perspective.
Yeah, and I'll just say, Allison, there are ways that I since you brought that up last time, or so at some meeting, I apologize. I don't know if it was the last one. I have inquired with other superintendents, and I think it'd be off agenda for me to weigh in, but I have more ideas than I used to about that. So we're happy to talk about that at a different time.
Yeah. And
Peter.
Allison.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Go ahead.
Oh,
Dara.
sorry. And just to add to that, it really working with the town engineers, Guilford and Jason and the whole school department, we are minimizing the traffic, the pavement needed. Everyone felt that entering and going through the parking lot and coming around and stacking the cars was acceptable. And that's wonderful. The staff should already be in their spots when the kids arrive, right? And then they shouldn't be out before the kids leave. So this really cut down on some of the pavement because we don't need to have a whole nother loop that might be going around. And so keeping the separation of the buses and cars, if you recall, the south entrance was all in and the north was all out, that this actually might reduce some of the congestion trying to get out at this north intersection because the buses have this whole southeast street to line up. So given everything that we were having to work with, we're really excited about the way this is all played out. The only other thing too that I would just like to point out, we did have a meeting with all of the public safety personnel, first responders, fire, police, everyone. Really super meeting. Kudos to everyone in Amherst to be coming together and working so well together. But we had a really great conversation with them last week. We will have, although it does not look like we'll have access, but we will have a 360-degree access around the building for emergency responders, whether it's the fire or ambulance. It will be paved, but it won't look like pavement going around the building, right? So, but it will be structurally sound so that first responders have access around the entire building as well. So we're, everyone weighed in and we're really excited about the direction that we're moving in.
Great. Peter.
Yeah, so I don't have any really detailed questions right now. I really just have a comment that, I mean, thank you for such a really inspiring design. I mean, it's so, I can't tell you what it feels like after having, thought about and tried to tackle this problem for so many years, and it's been so sad, especially when we were out of the MSBA process, right? And there was no solution on the horizon and we didn't know how this was all going to be able to resolve. So to now be able to see that walkthrough with that light, I mean, my heart skipped a beat of joy as that like stuttered video through the Zoom is going through and showing all that light, and what a wonderful resource the community is going to respond to, I think. And I love how you have the sort of community engaged open portion of the school that can be where you can close off the academic portion if you're going to have events or whatnot. I really like what you've done with the special ed space. I grew up at a time when the special ed kids were pushed as far away as possible from the mainstream classroom. So to see them right there front and center is wonderful. I love what you've done with the open space. The bus +2, I guess, to the bus car separation, really smart. Fortuitous about the wetland separation, that you're able to achieve that space. And you answered the only other question I had about how this design vets with first responders and whatnot. So very happy to hear that you've met with them. But just I guess I would just encourage Dr. Morris and the building committee to share this video. It's we rightly focus so much on the challenges, the obstacles, the cost, the complexities of achieving this very large community project. And we sometimes lose sight, I think, of the benefit and just the happiness this is going to bring so many children. But and it's that video is very evocative of that sentiment. So I really appreciate not just the marketing presentation, but the whole thoughtfulness that went into this design.
Yeah, I thank you, Peter. We're not done. We're really just starting, actually, if you can believe it. But everyone has been so wonderful to work with, and everyone on the committee, on the building committee, the town, community members have also weighed in, and this is really an evolution of what it means to you, Amherst, as a community. So I will be remiss if I do not say this, so I need to say net zero. We will have PVs on the roof. We will have sufficient PV canopies in the parking lot. It is geothermal or ground source heat pumps, just to refresh everyone's memory. And we did just have a test well for the geothermal. I don't know if anyone saw this huge rig. It really was kind of impressive out there the other day. So we have one well drilled and 79 to go, I guess. But all of this is moving forward. So we're really, really delighted to be working with such thoughtful and caring people throughout the town of Amherst. We hope this is very representative of you all.
I had just a couple more. I don't know if they're really questions or just sort of comments. Is you mentioned the dual language signage. I would also sort of, and I'm sure because there's the building committee is a great group of people, so I'm sure they're already asking this, but I think just from a universal accessibility perspective too, we don't want it to be only language, only word driven. So I think, if we can have, I saw for the gymnasium, you had sort of images of people tumbling, and if that same idea can be, applied to the music or the cafeteria and the like, so that there's multiple ways in to understand and locate in there. The other thought that I had, and I mentioned this the last time we had an update at our meeting about color, and as much as I love colorful spaces and colorful ways, I think the one sort of thought that I would like to sort of plant the seed is that color can also get dated really quickly. And so I know you mentioned that you're just going into sort of selecting materials. So, thinking about selecting materials and color in a way that affords flexibility and economical, flexibility and changes, should sort of 5-10 years from now, people hate that color green. And, we want to have a sort of a different approach, both on the exterior or the interior, so that we're not breaking the bank to sort of up, to maintain it and sort of keep it sort of feeling up to date.
Yeah, so thank you. And these are the actual same conversations we're having with the building committee and the design kind of working group. Is we don't want something to be a fad, right? Like right now, grays happen to be in, but we would never do that. But we want to make sure that the decisions that are made are timeless, that are, something that you can, see from the past and looking forward. That is something that will withstand the test of time. The exterior materials, Allison, definitely will be a lot harder to change once we select the exterior materials. So I think we have been studying that, and we will continue to refine those. But the interior, you mentioned sort of wayfinding, right? Accessibility to all. So we will use color as wayfinding. We will, maybe one floor, we were talking about kind of having a pattern that will lead to the academic wing, that maybe the first floor is blue and the second floor is yellow, the third floor is green. I'm just picking colors, but so that students will know, okay, I'm on the blue floor, so I know where I need to go for my colors. So we will use graphics and color also for wayfinding as well throughout the building. And we hear you about the colors, and we actually were having this conversation last Friday, like, let's make sure we're, not going to do something you want to paint the color in 5 years. That would break our heart.
Ben, did you have your hand up?
Nope, super unintentional.
Oh, okay. Other questions? Jennifer?
I have 2 questions about the fields. Donna, you mentioned something about wanting to get input from, I think you said soccer or community groups. And so my first question is, will there be an opportunity for community stakeholders to interact with the design team about the fields? And is the plan for the fields to have artificial turf?
So yes, we will continue to receive community input. We have gotten quite a bit of community input, and we're going to continue to work with all stakeholders on the layout and the different sizes of the fields. I do want to say it is a school first, and most importantly, it will be to make sure that we meet the requirements for the school's recess and outdoor learning, and then the fields. But we're really excited about the opportunity to expand the fields because we're able to bring the school further south. The fields are not turf, and I'm going to assume that perhaps what you're referring to is a reference that was made at a meeting last week, that we are exploring an opportunity of having a very small area that is in the vicinity of the school that would be a field that might have turf in a certain fashion, so that the school can actually use it year round, and that it can be plowed and it will be accessible for the school to use year round. And I believe that was brought up. So obviously you're hearing the same kind of questions.
So that you're talking about that play field, I think it's labeled on another page, that play field in the rectangle.
This little rectangle, it's a very small area. It is not any of the large fields that would be for community use. It's a great idea that we want to explore and weigh the costs of it and see what we can do. But to be able to provide a grass or field space for students year round is just an amazing opportunity. We saw that at one of the recent schools that we visited that was just constructed, and they say they can get in there, they can plow it, and they use that year round. And Mike, I don't know if you want to touch on the importance of that.
Yeah, so right, I know there's a variety of issues. So I think the first thing to clarify is this isn't a turf field like you would see at a high school or college. It was a very soft, spongy material. So in terms of like safety of kids or falling or things like that, it doesn't have that same kind of hard feel to it. And so we're in Needham, and the facilities person said it was closed for 4 days all year last year, that they were able to plow it. And we have many students who really benefit from having area and room for physical exercise. And not every student, preferred exercise happens on a hard top play area. So not just for recess, but for students who have movement breaks and want to be very active in the movement break. You know, we tend to have a lot of seasons in New England, that are part of New England anyway, that like, you know, it kind of bogs down a lot of the things that we would like to do outside. So, you know, I know there'll be a variety of opinions about this. I'm glad you raised it, Jennifer, but I think the idea is, how do we provide, you know, close to year-round ability for students to exercise on a surface that's not a hardscape. You know, I think what we saw, I think it was Needham, I'm looking at Donna and Tim, was that this was, you know, they found highly successful for students. Not every student played on it. No one has to play on it, but it provided that ability and that outlet for students to be able to use throughout the year that's just not possible on grass, because we live in New England. No matter how good the drainage is, it's going to snow, it's going to get icy. You can't plow it. And if you can't plow it and shovel it, then it means it's not going to be accessible for large swaths of the school year. And so, you know, we'll see where this goes. As Donna said, there's a cost implication. There's difference of opinions, right? None of this is, as you said, Donna, this is the beginning, not the end. But the idea of having a space for our students to exercise in outside year round is particularly attractive, because, you know, there are lots of days in the winter where kids are outside at recess. In fact, most of the days in the winter, kids are outside in recess. And right now they're in pretty confined spaces. And if you want to be on the swings, or you want to be, you know, doing those kind of activities, there's plenty of opportunity. But if you want to do some other activities, there's not a lot of options. And so that's really the thinking, and we'll see where it goes. But it was notable. I mean, that 4 days sticks. I don't know about you, Donna, but when he said that stuck in my head, to think of a school year where there was a soft surface where kids could be exercising, and there was only 4 days all year it couldn't be, was pretty attractive.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I just would urge you.
I'm just gonna, sorry, unless if it's a separate question, then I'm gonna ask you to hold it, because other people have their hands raised. We're running over time. If we have we have 10 minutes left for this topic, and we still have another bit to cover, I believe, on the school building project, sort of the one that you need some input on from the school committee. So I'm going to move to Ben and Peter, and then Jennifer, if you still have your question, then please raise your hand again. Ben?
Yeah, just real briefly. I was just wondering if you could like specify the material that was used on the soft surface there. I know there's like a few different types, and I was just kind of looking for if it's a brand name. You don't necessarily have to say.
Thank you, Ben. We'll have to circle back with them and see the specific type of surface that they used. Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate the exploration of the outdoor surface, and you know, just as you continue to explore this and get community feedback on it, you know, I think it's just important to articulate, you know, what surface it is we're talking about, because when people say the word artificial, it can mean a number of different things. You know, for example, I'm sure you probably know you can't build a playground that's ADA accessible these days without it being an artificial surface, because grass is not ADA accessible, and unless you're grandfathered in, you can't use wood chips either. So, and that's a far cry of what you'd see, like, for example, in a new playground versus what you'd see at like a college athletic field. And yet, you know, the evocation emotionally sometimes can be similar. And so I just think that's the thing to articulate, and just bring the facts and have a good discussion, and go from there. But I really appreciate the creative exploration. I love the idea of outdoor space that's closed for a handful of days during the year.
I think I was going to bring up the ADA sort of just physical accessibility factor, because I know that we've been looking, we had a whole review of sort of things that we needed to do to our play spaces at our pre-existing elementary schools to make them accessible, and it's not inexpensive. So planning ahead of time and sort of building that into the design, I think, is super important. I was thinking of that also for the nature trail planning, so I don't know if that's been discussed as well. Jennifer.
So my last just really quick thing is just I wanted to ask if you would, or if you had considered gender neutral bathrooms. I saw a girls' bathroom and a boys' bathroom, but just, I don't have a question, and we don't need to go back and look at it, but just like, have you thought about gender neutral bathrooms? Something to think about.
So the answer is yes and yes. We do. Code Mass code actually requires us to have a boys and a girls, believe it or not. So we do have multi-stall for boys and girls, and then we do have a gender neutral bathroom actually directly across the hall for them. So it's right. So staff gender neutral. We have a couple of more located in this vicinity and also up by the cafeteria or cafetorium on every floor.
I wondered if that's what the T was when I saw
Yeah,
that.
sorry, toilet.
Okay.
We get really creative here. T for toilet. Yep.
So I think we should, I know that there's a topic about cameras that we need to talk about, that you need input or feedback from the school committee on this fall. And so I wanted to, I don't know if that's you, Donna, or Mike.
We can do it up if Donna, so I think it's fair to say last Friday, as I mentioned earlier, we met with a bunch of folks in public safety. Cress, Earl, thank you for being there and your contributions. A number of folks from the police, fire, first responders, town, Ben and Rupert from our facilities department, Jerry Champagne from my IS department, and we were looking at all things. It was about a little over 2 hours of a meeting, looking at safety in the building. And one of the critical pieces that we heard from the architects and the designers was trying to understand what we're thinking about in terms of cameras. And Donna can talk about what's typical, or Donna, Tim, and Rick can talk about what's typical. But we thought it was important to gather feedback before we came to school committee from kind of public safety and first responders in our community. Donna, do you want to say what's typical, and then either you or I could sort of summarize the outcome of the meeting, the recommendation that came from that group?
Sure. So the goal for the cameras is really for the protection and safety of staff and students in a school. What we currently see, what's kind of commonplace in today, is to provide interior cameras at all stairwells so that you can capture people entering or leaving the building, even though all the doors will be locked unless you have a card access to enter the building. And then just in main corridors, there is sometimes in some communities they have chosen because the community is heavily using them, to put them in the gymnasium or the cafetorium if they will be used by the community at large. But other than that, you just put them in the quarters to make sure you can access and see what's going on at, down the corridors and at the entries of all the buildings. They're not in classrooms. They're certainly not in bathrooms. They're not even in the library. It would be more of a community decision if you would like them in spaces that the community would be using, such as the gymnasium or the cafetorium.
Yeah, and if I could weigh in for a second, thank you, Donna, for that. I see the elementary school as a really different kind of perspective, or I have a different perspective than we have on the cameras at the secondary schools. So for me, the exterior cameras would be really helpful. I think it's first worth clarifying, these aren't surveillance camera. There's no one in a room looking at the running video like you might see in a movie or in a bank or something like that. These are really trying to best understand if there is a concern, or there are, unfortunately, vandalism, things like that. It helps us along those dimensions. And so for me, and I think this was true in our group, was the priority being the exterior cameras, and then the cameras only in spaces that are, more typically used by the public, like as Donna mentioned, front entryway, things like that. Much like our current schools, although a more updated model, in terms of the buzz system, right? There'll be, that's sort of like the only sort of live feed that, people would see. So if someone buzzes in, they can see the person at the front door live, but the rest of it is really around supporting the safety of the school. But I don't feel like we need the same extent of cameras as we have at the secondary level, where we have them, in most hallways, in classroom wings, because the nature of elementary school for me feels really different than the nature of secondary school. So, sort of, I guess, the recommendation I'm bringing is a little lighter in terms of cameras than what Donna described, which is typical, but really focus on the outside and the areas that have access to the public, not so much in the classroom wing, because I just don't think we would access them. And I think at the elementary level, they'd be, and you all can have different opinions, but just my perspective is I don't think we need them. I did feel supported by our public safety folks, including, police, fire, Crest, that, that seemed like a reasonable compromise, at least to bring to this body and get feedback on. Ben, you were in that meeting. I don't know if that connects to how you walked away from that meeting in terms of perspective on cameras.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea of having the outside coverage is the most important, just based on situations we've had at that exact location. Like I don't want to be rude and talk about what types of neighbors we've had there that have not necessarily been great stewards of the land, so to speak. But yeah, that pretty much captures it.
And I'll just say the reason that we're asking for feedback is that our designers need to know some of this in their design and cost estimating and all the things coming up. So I know many of you may have questions or comments for us, but that's why they're trying to gather this feedback, because this is part of the nature of where we are in schematic design.
Peter.
Yeah, so something I'd like to give a little more thought to. My initial reaction is that yes, we should have cameras at our elementary school buildings to some degree, primarily because our first charge is the safety and care of students. Parents drop their young children off to us and expect us to be responsible for them, and that's the first the first charge above all else is to care for their whereabouts, their well-being. And this is going to be a large building, and it's going to have a degree of community access. And so we need to make sure that we are fulfilling, completely our responsibility to keep children safe. And I don't really have concerns about overuse or surveillance. I mean, I think that certainly we can look at our current policies and then update our policies about the use of such things, and when recording is occurring, how long are, what's the, and there's Mass General Law that impacts this as well. So it would be probably worthy of a follow-on discussion about those impacts. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to talk about use policy and that not. But that being said, I feel like I need to take the recommendations of safety professionals, the first responders, the principals in the building, and the other administrators and teachers who are responsible for childcare, and give them the tools that they need to succeed. So that's my feeling. I certainly don't feel like a need to overdo it. Certainly not if there's no particular reason that the superintendent or other first responders are putting forth. I don't see any reason to go beyond what is recommended as the core strategic deployment of resources to keep kids safe.
Jennifer.
So let's see. I feel like with cameras, there's always a balance between privacy and safety. And I appreciate, Mike, you saying that like this isn't going to be a situation where anyone's going to be monitoring the cameras. But I feel like, I think that people from historically marginalized populations are going to have less trust in institutions, are going to be more uncomfortable in a space with cameras. And it's just I'm not against the idea of cameras, but we do have in our town a community safety and social justice committee, and those two things right there are the two things that I feel like we need to be balanced in the discussion about cameras, is safety and social justice. So I would be interested in hearing that committee's opinions and perspectives on the idea of cameras at the school.
Irv.
it seems to me that, cameras in the elementary school are not something to be considered to be problematic. They are, in large instances, necessities, especially when you're talking about stairways, stairwells, entry points, etc. And also, as a matter of school safety in relationship to hallways. I think that, when an issue is raised that these cameras may be problematic to marginalized people, it's sort of like, for me, um, just for me, denigrates the resiliency and the competence and the ability of people to be with technology as any other group would be. I do not see that as something that is that would adversely affect someone, a child who is, say, BIPOC versus a child who is white, and that both of those children would see cameras in a different way. I see that as a problematic point of view.
And
Yeah, I think I have a similar but slightly different perspective from Irv there. Like, so just based on certain situations, I think as a member of a historically marginalized group, I think that it kind of benefits folks in that area, right? Like if you have a kid who's accused of doing something wrong, like on the property, like vandalism or something like that, it's a lot easier to actually back yourself up if there's video evidence that you did not do that. But because overall, that's actually my perspective on the surveillance cameras, is that it's the site that we need to surveil above and beyond anything else. And like I said, there have been incidents there on that exact property that I think having video evidence would have backed up a young BIPOC child or 2 or 10.
Mike, did you have
Yeah, if I could just jump in, just our current process, again, that I have in a different district, just to be really clear, is that there is no surveillance. This is a recording that if anyone wants information from, we have very strict protocols for, and the protocol indicates that principal has to request, or director, because it could be a facilities kind of issue, directs video. For me, they specify a time, a location, and a reason. If it doesn't reach the reason that relates to safety or vandalism, that request is rejected. So me or my designee, if I'm out, then Doreen would play that role, approve it, but it's ex post facto, right? It's not like there is literally no feed for someone to be accessing live. It's with the exception of the front door and entry to the front door, which only goes on if someone's there. So it really is looking at situations or claims that are made around safety and accessing that video. So I want to really emphasize that point, because I think there's a difference between surveillance cameras that you might see. Again, I'm using bank often because that's, I think, the ones that are most visible, and what we're talking about here. And I think Peter's right. I think we should have a conversation like that. There's a different district about what protocols would see about accessing video. But we've as someone who gets these requests and has to weigh them, we have really strict protocols, and I think it's important that we maintain that in this particular district around control and access of those videos. And it's for me, that's really important. It's really important that we understand what we're talking about here, that there is no, person sitting in a chair just looking at all that. There's not that person. It's not just a staffing issue. It's not designed as such. And then we have firm protocols around video and video sharing, and how videos can be shared if it's a police matter, how that works. And I think those are good conversations. I will say my opinion, that's been really helpful at another district I work for. That there's been, incidents that have happened, whether it be the community after school or even some incidents during the school day, where having that video evidence help us really understand what happened. And I think, as people noted, talk about what didn't happen, which is equally important. So, my experience in a different district is that videos have actually helped us, and they truly have contributed to our safety. And certainly that viewpoint was shared by the public safety folks who are on the call, who deal with the other end of things. So that's just my 2 cents. Certainly something we can come back to next month, but I wanted to share the kind of feedback that we received from first responders, my own 2 cents on it. Again, that's a bit reduced from the norm that Donna and Tim and Rick interact with, but I do think my belief is it's right size for our community, and trying to limit video access, or not access, but limit video cameras to the most critical places in our schools that are most important in terms of school safety, and not going too much beyond that. We're not going beyond that at all.
I haven't had a chance to speak yet, so sorry. Because I think it's interesting, the conversation and hearing everybody's perspectives on this notion of both privacy and safety, and safety both in terms of personal safety and justice, as well as from a public safety and security perspective. And I think that this idea of being uncomfortable with cameras and being relieved or reassured with cameras are both true and can both be felt by the same human being at a given time. So I don't think it's an either or I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So I go back to, in more ways than our current elementary school buildings are, these buildings, we talked about wanting them to be, this building to be a community resource, and we're designing it specifically so that it can be a community resource in ways that our current schools are not. And the idea is that usage will be larger than it is right now in any one of our individual elementary schools. And for that reason, we don't like to talk about this, so we don't like to think about sort of the potential for vandalism or destructive of property or sort of unsafe situations. And yet the worst case scenario would be that we don't have anything to help us sort of solve that problem and troubleshoot after something like that has happened. Even if it's graffiti in the hallways, we still want to solve that and sort of address that situation. So I think this notion of sort of limited interior cameras that sort of are deployed in those spaces where we anticipate and want sort of more heavy community use. You've talked about sort of where the stairwells and the academic wings will be locked. And so for me, that sort of also offers that reassurance that we don't need to worry as much about sort of community activity, nefarious activity happening in those, beyond those locked doors. And I think thinking through that way, can also help us sort of protect the rest of the building during those community uses. And I would also say, and again, this is uncomfortable to talk about, but we've seen time and time again situations where the worst has happened in terms of, whether it's school invasion, school shootings, etc., that cameras after the fact have helped, but those are also primarily where the entryways are, as sort of in helping to understand sort of timeline and who, what, where, when, how, right? So that, again, uncomfortable to talk about, but something that I think realistically we need to consider as we think about this. That doesn't change, though, sort of putting the emphasis and the focus on those public spaces near the entrance, and not sort of beyond in the heart of the academic wing, at least in my perspective. And I am glad to have the input from CRES and fire and police in our town. I think our plan is to come back at this again, sort of teeing up this idea and sort of all the ins and outs of this, and then come back at our next month's meeting to sort of come to some consensus. I think is that what you're hoping for, Mike and Donna?
I would like to make one final comment for me. I recently was toured three or four elementary schools in the inner city, which were mostly minority, BIPOC, 95% such. And cameras were everywhere in the hallways. classrooms, etc. Now, there's ones in the classrooms that were turned on at the requests of the teachers, and they had control of that. But cameras were a part of their life, and I didn't hear any, especially when the parent groups or kids talk about or feel that they were being surveilled for some nefarious reason, but they felt it was a safety kind of accoutrement that needed to be in those schools, and it was something they felt as was a necessity, because that was the first time remark going, because I walked in and there were these cameras everywhere, but parents and teachers thought that they were a necessity, I didn't hear any parents complain about the presence of those cameras.
Thank you. So we'll add this to our agendas for next time. If there is, and I think we've taken up a lot of your time, and I really appreciate as always, Donna, Tim, and Rick joining us tonight. It's always tonight was especially so, I think, with the walkthrough tour, if you will, but always appreciate when you're able to join us and give us these detailed updates. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Happy, and we're excited. We'll be back soon, I would assume, Mike, right? We're moving fast on this, and we're coming up on some pretty exciting stuff. So we remain available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank
Night.
you.
And so now we'll move on to our next item, which is the CRESS MOU. And before I turn it over to Earl and Mike, I just want to preface this with explain a little bit of what our hope is for tonight. So just to remind ourselves of the role, our role with regard to contracts and MOUs, the superintendent's role when it comes to this. We hire the superintendent to run the district. He is the top executive, if you will, the chief executive for our school district. And as part of his duties and responsibilities, that is to represent the district in developing and implementing contracts and MOUs, or memorandums of understanding. That is part of his responsibility, and we sort of have delegated that responsibility to the superintendent. So we have a great relationship with our superintendent, and in sharing and sort of wanting to get our input on these things, and for that we are super appreciative. And so this is another opportunity for us to review, understand, and offer feedback on this MOU. But just to be clear that this is within Mike's responsibility and authority to sort of execute and make changes. So with that, I will turn that over to you, Mike.
Sure. So I'll do process a little bit, and then thank you, Earl, for being here. So the way after our last set of meetings in this committee, another committee, Earl initiated some thoughts about the MOU. I took a cut at it and shared it with Earl and with the town manager as well. We refined things. We shared it with legal counsel. Legal counsel had their thoughts and opinions that were integrated in. I know that was a request that we had from the committee last time to make sure our legal counsel has vetted it. I can tell you that our legal counsel has vetted it and offered changes that were accepted into the document. We wanted to bring it here tonight to gather your thoughts and feedback. We tried to put it in the packet ahead of time, well ahead of time, but of course there was changes once we heard back from legal counsel. So if you looked at it last week, it's had some minor edits from there to where we are here. To me, I feel very proud of this draft. It is a draft. The watermarking got funky on the first page, but you can see on the second page, it really clearly says draft on it. And it really talks about the rules of engagement, who CRESS officers, responders are, what their authority is and is not. It really kind of reiterates the point that CREST responders operate on the direction of the CREST director, but that the key decisions about consequences and discipline, all those still remain as they always do with school principals under Mass General Law. I think one of the things that was really important that our legal counsel added was the bullet point about personal student information. And that was a really critical piece that we want to make sure that the only things being shared are shareable with our CREST colleagues in our community, and that there's no cost involved. So that last bulleted point was around cost sharing or fee for service. So, we bring this as a draft. We're open to any feedback. I will say that, Earl can certainly speak for himself, but this was but this was a team effort. And in terms of Earl and Paul, that we're all comfortable and confident that this is coming to you in draft form for your feedback. It's not that someone hasn't viewed it or Earl seeing it for the first time, or it hasn't been reviewed at length by our legal counsel. And so again, just wanted to get your sense of any feedback you have. I think if you think of something after tonight, you know where to find me, and we can have that conversation. But I think for me, this I appreciate the push from the school committee to kind of document this relationship in a critical way. And, I feel like this is our first take at it, and I feel pretty good about the nature of it, as did our legal counsel. So I'll stop there unless Earl has more that he wants to add.
I just want to say how thankful I am for being able to go through this process. We're realizing we're going to have to write a lot of MOUs, so I'm really grateful that our first one was with the schools, and Mike made this a survivable process for me. So I want to thank him for that.
Thanks, Earl.
Glad to hear that you've survived, and hopefully are thriving too. Okay, lots of hands, so I'm going to open the queue so I can ask them and calling you in order of raising them. So Jennifer.
I have a comment and a question. The question is the one that says all parties agree. The 1, 2, 3, 4th one down. CREST responders will provide conflict resolution services only when all parties agree to voluntarily engage with their services. I assume that all parties includes like the student and their family, not just CREST and the school?
Yes.
And if that's clear, then I don't need to.
Yeah, I think the only clarification I'd offer, is that we do have students who are the age of adults and they don't need parent consent anymore. And so I just want to be, if it was, excuse me, we're talking in elementary. Never mind. I apologize. We'll talk about that next week, Jennifer. But
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I hope not.
And I'd also say that matches the style of mediation that we were trained in. You can't engage in it if any party is unwilling.
Okay, great. And then just my one suggestion is about the next bullet point. CREST responders are unarmed. Therefore, if safety situations arise, I just would suggest separating those into 2 different bullet points. Like CREST responders are and will always be unarmed, period. And then if safety situations arise that require additional support. Otherwise, it kind of sounds like if arms are required, then the police will be called, which is a little intimidating. So just like putting those in 2 different bullet points just separates them out.
Peter.
Yeah, so I reviewed this draft looking for all of the items we brought up, and it I think this is a really strong draft. It really ticks all the boxes of the items that I thought we needed to clarify in a document like this. I very clear about no fee for service in terms of relationship with the town budget. I like the clarification about the multiple clarifications about authority, right? Where there's no authority to impose discipline or to take charge of a situation, that this is clearly a support service, as discussed last time and at other committees, for some really difficult situations that our principals have nowhere else to turn to, other than to escalate it. And so to have this extended social service available, that just makes the operation of our schools and the safety of our schools and the supporting of our children and our students and our families is really great. I mean, I said this before last time, but so I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of all the things that have been itemized. I think it really reflects well on the feedback we provided last time. I still think, just generally speaking, is a little bit by the by from this, that one of the challenges I think CREST has is just people understanding what CREST does, right? And it's one of those things, at least for me, that the more I learn about it, and the more that I learn about how helpful they've been in particular situations, the more I appreciate it. So I think, if now that we're approaching CREST having this formal arrangement with our schools, we should think about a consistent relationship, right? About whether it's at open houses, whether it's at the elementary schools, whether it's the first night back, whether it's at commencement. I know you're stretched thin and you have a lot of irons in the fire, but it would be great just for people to be able to meet someone from CREST and to talk about CREST and to say, oh, I've heard about this. Well, what is it that you actually, just to kind of create that sort of disarming relationship, and so that people can understand it with ask their own questions, right? In a comfortable, informal way, I think would be really great. But yeah, I appreciate the collaborative work of the town and the school on this.
Sure.
This is really a great document, and I also appreciate the effort that was put into it by both Mike and staff and Earl. And I also appreciate Mike and staff and Earl at least letting me talk through some of my issues. I really appreciated that a lot. The other thing is that there are some comments here. My comment, one, it would be really good and helpful if this memorandum of understanding had some date to it, and that it was dated, and it was going to be dated as of today or tomorrow. And it's going to be for 1 year, 1 school year. In other words, that it has a beginning and it has an end, and it's dated. And because right now it's just like, well, is this just for today, or is it for 1 year, or for whatever? But that needs to be in there somewhere. The other thing is that it would be really good, not as a part of this MOU, that when this MOU is finalized, that all of the information that's in here be communicated to parents and the rest of the community, so that they understand what this is all about and what the relationship is going to be between CREST and the schools. And the other thing is, Jennifer kind of hit up on it in terms of CREST responders will provide conflict resolution, and only at the request. And I think it gets at one of the things that came out of what Earl had talked about before in terms of a consensual relationship. I think that at the elementary school level, that's less problematic than at the high school level, in terms of a consensual relationship between the CREST responder and the student, in terms of entering into that. But that is something that really needs to be considered. I guess my overall feeling is this is great. I really like what is here. I would like to see this communicated once it's finalized, and some dates put in there, that it's communicated widely throughout the school community.
Ben.
Yeah, I also want to redundantly echo my appreciation for the work on this. And so I have a soapbox. I just want to preface my statement with that. So I understand, and it's been explained that the consensual relationship part, right? I call it the vampire clause. You have to invite us in for us to do our magic. But I'm just wondering, it's sort of implied here, but it's not stated directly, that there will not be like a permanent 9 to 5 presence. I'm kind of hinting at the SRO, situation school resource officer. And not for me, like I trust, but I think there's some folks in our community that would like to see that just in writing, that we're not using CREST as like a Trojan horse to have SROs in our buildings or whatever. And like I said, I trust, but I mean, that could even be added on to one of the bullet points in some way, shape, or form, I would think. But yeah, just echoing again, kudos. Thank you. And again, thank you for all the hard work on this.
Before you go, Mike, I'm just going to say my thoughts, which is +1 to everything everybody has said. So I'm not going to take up more time, but I just want to add my kudos, my thanks, and I think that the comments that my colleagues have all made, I would +1 those. So, Mike.
I was going to say the same, and as you, Allison, and I think I can't speak for Earl and Paul, but I think those are all the suggestions that were made tonight are both easily implementable in terms of the document, but also improve the document, right, and improve. And I agree with the piece about communication that Irv said as well around that, because I think that was a concern that came from the committee earlier. Is just making sure that the community is aware, and we have some really easy platforms to do that. But this is really helpful feedback that, again, I think in short order, some of you may see next week, right? In a different meeting, because I think that's really helpful feedback that can be integrated in quickly and easily. And I really appreciate the close read, to pick up specific things that either were in the document or not in the document. I appreciate everyone's time and energy before the meeting to capture those. Earl, I don't know if you have other thoughts from our end.
No, just thank you all so much. It's really been a learning process. I think the feedback makes a lot of sense. On my end, we kind of include all of that in law enforcement, right? We're not, but I think saying it explicitly makes a ton of sense. So I also just want to say that there are other communities that are going to use this as a guidepost. So the work we did will also benefit other folks, and so I appreciate you in that regard too.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Great. So we will move on to our next item, which is the 6th grade move to the middle school update.
Yep.
And I should say the middle school building.
Mary Kyle is here. Thank you for being here. This is going to be a brief oral update and see if there's questions. We're going to come with much, as we'll talk about timeline, many more, a lot more discussion next month. But this is mostly a process update. So we've continued to gather feedback. We met with all the 5th grade classes. As you saw, that we did a quick write-up. Thanks to Mary for really wonderful use of tables. Very, very clear on that. So we shared, we met with all of them. It was fabulous. Their feedback was essential. We're still trying to schedule with the middle school student council. They're still the beginning of the year for them. So they're forming, the 8th grade students are formed, but the 7th grade student council is still being formed. So we're going to look to do that soon. We had a staff family survey that was also in the packet that was sent out, and the results are coming in on Friday. So unfortunately, we don't have them for you today, but we had, I know we had triple digits responses after like the first or second day when the last time I looked, but we'll be gathering that and sharing that with you, as well as the summary with the community. I think that in terms of how these conversations have went, and you've seen that in the evidence that was presented, really starting to hone in on some critical points that we wanted some explicit feedback on: world language models, teacher team models, some around kind of structured, unstructured time, as well as providing feedback for our partners at Amherst Recreation. We did share the student feedback. We'll share the adult feedback with them soon about additional after-school programming that they're looking to be able to start next year for our 6th grade students. So we continue to have that, and we'll continue to have more opportunities in the next 6 weeks. Mary and I are meeting. We met yesterday. We'll continue to meet about providing additional opportunities. We also met with ELL staff, special education staff, and very critically on a logistics end, meeting with middle school leadership staff. So while this is a 6th grade program, it's really important that we continue to maintain good relationships with our middle school colleagues about space and schedules and bells and safety. And so we had our first meeting last week, and we'll be meeting with them, I think, every other week for foreseeable future, because as we're getting more refined, a number of pieces are getting clarified, and then that brings up items to work out. Additionally, on the logistics, since that's my segue, we had a lot of conversations and really helpful work with DESE about how this all will work, and including our IS staff too. So some of the things that probably I'll say I wasn't in the front of my my brain, and certainly probably not from the public, is how do we report this? What school did these students attend? From a Title I perspective, you know, how do we account for that? From a discipline, all the things that we report, since students are being mixed up and they're not regional schools, middle school students, how are we going to manage that? And so we wanted to work with our DESE partners. It goes into food service, transportation, right? All these things are we have reports to DESE that we produce, as well as MCAS and accountability. So had a lengthy conversation yesterday with my primary contact, but it actually spans about 6 or 7 departments at DESE, how to do this. And so, you know, in full disclosure, I want to share that we are actively having conversations, the best way to approach this. And one of the things on the table is that this becomes its own, you know, technical school with its own DESE code, which I'll admit at the beginning of this process, I had a less than positive reaction to, and the deeper in I get, the more and more that may be a clean way to do it. Because what, even as simple as, what does the report card say their school's at, right? Like, I mean, there's all these kind of like really on the ground types of things that we need to manage. So, you know, we want to work in conjunction with DESE, because we do our reporting to them primarily, but they also do reporting to the federal government. So we sort of have to be aligned on that front. I don't think the regional agreement or anything significant is going to change where these students are regional school students, you know, for next year. I think that's really off the table, if that ever happens. But, you know, I don't think we can plan for that for next year. So the other piece DESE wanted to talk through was a lease agreement for space. Fortunately, we have lease agreement language in the regional agreement and our current regional agreement. So a lot of that is sort of already defined by the amendment in 1961 to our regional agreement. I don't have it handy off top of me, but they were really pleased to hear that we have language in our original agreement on that topic, rather than recreating it or making adjustments to a regional agreement just on lease language. So that's the good news in terms of logistics. But I actually think the big good news in logistics is it's getting very real, right? It's getting from this theoretical construct to, no, how do we do some of these things? Where do MCAS tests go? Right. And I know that sounds like unimportant, but, you know, our district already has, and districts already have, layers and layers of bureaucratic organization that's messy to go through, that takes our attention away from what we want to be spending our time on, which is our students. And so anything that helped clarify that, I'm in favor of. We are scheduling a time, I think it's next month, with middle school staff to kind of work through some of the questions they may have as well, in addition to working with their leadership team. So going back to timeline, as we gather this feedback, both logistics, but more importantly, right now on program, we aim to bring a month from now a revised document from the summer document based on the feedback we received and professional judgment to your next meeting, which is on sometime in about a month from now. We'll talk about that probably when we do future agenda planning, exactly when that is, for your consideration, and then a more final version to be completed in December. And so that was what we committed to do, to have a final draft approved before the new year. And that really allows us to start working on the staffing pieces that I somewhat obliquely referred to earlier when I was talking about enrollments and, you know, K-5 and then 6th grade, because we do have to work on the staffing piece. We also are going to plan to have conversations, you know, with all staff at the elementary level to fill them in as this is going. I mean, surveys are great, but we also want to have additional conversations and opportunities for dialogue. So that's where we are in terms of kind of the academic program, the logistical, bureaucratic aspects, and then our timeline. And Mary and I are here to answer any questions or hear any feedback that any of the committee members have. Mary, did I miss anything, or did I capture?
No, I thought that was beautifully summarized. There are a lot of points.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions? Peter.
Yeah, so thank you for attaching the documents. I really enjoyed reading the 5th grader responses. I mean, I love that list of extracurricular and clubs. I mean, yes, please fund mini golf and ninja course as soon as possible, Mike. We need to get that into the capital plan. But what a great view into the mind of 5th graders. But actually, the thing I found the most compelling about that was the question about the language model. So, you know, I just crunched the numbers a different way. And of those that responded, 78% preferred the single language model per year as opposed to the current idea of 4 that I found, I mean, that gives me pause at a minimum. And I just wonder what how that impacts your thinking, Mike, and what other conversations maybe you've have you had other conversations with language teachers or models, or what's your current take on this?
Yeah, so we're looking for the adult feedback, which will again have that. My initial look was it was somewhat different from the student feedback, but so we want to consider both of those, not to prioritize one over the other, but I think it's good to triangulate your data. I think it brings about some questions for us about readiness and students' readiness to make that choice. I'm not wed to one of the. I want to be really clear. If I had a strong leaning, I would say it now. I think we're in the consideration. I'm in the consider. I'll speak for myself. I'm in the consideration phase. But it was compelling, and even more compelling than looking at the data was Mary and I were both in all the rooms and hearing students, right? So we had qualitative data as well from those visits and the excitement. And as a former 6th grade teacher, I guess I'll put a little bit of my thoughts out here. What I know about 6th graders is things go smoother when they have a lot of access and choice to be taking the classes they want to take. And it goes less well sometimes if they're forced to take electives that they are less enthusiastic about. And so I think that's developmentally where they are. And for me, separate from language and language acquisition, which I think there's legitimate arguments both ways on, I like the fact that, if we do change the language model, that students would have a bit more access to feeling like they're making a decision and owning that decision, and a little more independence in that than having an exploratory program that, well, I think there's a lot of good reasons to think about it that way, eliminates that additional layer of independence from our students. So we're still in the waiting for more feedback consideration phase, but the data that you saw, the numeric data, was really backed up with lots of anecdotal feedback of, I've been waiting to take Spanish for so long, or French. I have family members who speak French, and I want to start as soon as possible. Or one student said, isn't it true that, like, this is at Fort River, that like the younger you are in learning a language, the quicker you acquire it? And that's why, if someone's younger sibling is in the Comandantes program and they're able to acquire it, and they're thinking 1 year would make a big difference, which it might, right? I'm not dismissing that feedback at all. So there was some compelling qualitative feedback that went along with the quantitative feedback that you received. I don't know, Mary, if you have other things that you wanted to share with that as well. Don't feel like you need to, Mary.
No, I don't think so, Mike. I think, no, thank you.
Staying on the language topic, I sort of it's not a huge question, but you brought up Comandantes, and we're talking about world language. So what is our thinking in terms of what happens for those currently 3rd graders when they move to 6th grade at the middle school? Do they drop out of Comandantes? Do we have a section of world language that is specifically for what is our thinking right now? Or is that just, you're just scratching the surface of that right now?
Yeah, I mean, somewhere in between. I would say we're not scratching the surface, but I wouldn't say we have a plan. So when we were first starting Comandantes, for those of you who remember, Katie and I went to visit school district, and we went to the middle school as well. It's actually one of the most compelling things was hearing the middle school principal, who was a feeder, I think there was 4 feeder schools, say, I know they do a language school because demographically they're integrated at lunch in a way that my other schools aren't. And that was one of our aha moments. And we saw it. We were in the cafeteria and we saw it, and we're like, this is really different. Yes, there's academic benefit, but to think of the social benefit was really different. And hearing the middle school principal say that. So the most typical model for dual language middle schools, that what's been shared with us, is to have for students who choose to continue in it, right? I think there has to be a choice component to develop a language course that's consistent for where they are, which is not going to be a language course that currently exists in our middle school. And the second part is to maintain one core subject in that other language, in our case, Spanish, but there's other dual language programs in other languages. So that's what we've seen other school districts do in the middle school. We already do have some experience with particularly in Spanish, for Spanish course for native speakers. The difference is most of those courses are focused on native speakers who haven't had academic instruction in that language.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a pretty substantially different course than currently exists in terms of world language, but also trying to identify, is there a subject with the right staff member who feels, who's confident in teaching, whether it's math, English, math literacy, social studies, or science in that core language. So that's the model that we've seen. Katie and I have had initial conversations about that. We really want to a certain extent, we've made a decision. It's a next year exploration, deeper dive. This year, so much focus is going on this particular set of students going to 6th grade. And we don't want to spread ourselves too thin with the long-term questions, but it comes up when Katie and I meet, and I'm sure for Mary as well, in the dialogue. But that's sort of the models that we've seen out there. So it reduces, if you think of half a day in Spanish that our students are currently receiving, in most middle schools, it gets reduced to between a quarter and a third. Yeah.
We have a couple years before.
No, but it's not. It comes up. I'm glad you asked because it's very real.
Other questions? No. Okay. So we'll be coming back again at this in November. Okay.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Bye.
Great. So our next topic is cell phones in elementary schools, and this was brought up. I think it came up in one of our prior meetings, maybe just only in future agenda planning. But one of the things we wanted to understand was the extent to which cell phones are currently, how prevalent are they in our elementary schools today, and what is our current approach and policy, and sort of what is our experience with that? Are there sort of hurdles, issues, wishes, et cetera, in that, and whether this is something that the school committee wants to take up? So I think if you can, right now the school committee doesn't have a policy specific to elementary school cell phones. I know that in practice, our individual school buildings and the teachers do. So maybe you could introduce that, share some of that insight with us, Mike.
Sure. I mean, at the elementary level, we fortunately have not run into issues with cell phone usage during the school day. In general, students aren't allowed to have their cell phones out. The vast majority of our elementary school students don't have cell phones. 6th grade, you start seeing a little difference that way, but as compared to older students I have in a different district, we've, knock on wood, have not had cell phone issues in school. I want to be clear about that. There sometimes has been cell phone issues out of school that come into school, but in terms of actual use of cell phones in school, that has not been an issue. What I want to be clear is, students posting things on their social media accounts, things like that, whether that's on their phone or their computer. But we do have examples of that coming into school. But in terms of actual cell phone issues with cell phones coming into school and being problematic, that has not been something, knock on wood, we've typically had too many issues with, or really issues at all at the elementary level.
How is it dealt with when an issue does arrive in the school?
So we do a lot of parent contact. We say, elementary school is not a place where we're using cell phones in class, but really, I believe I could count on one hand the number of times that any of our schools have done that in my 7 years doing this job. That really just, and there's plenty of things we're working on. This just hasn't been one of them, fortunately.
Peter.
So, that's good to hear. The reason why I asked for this to be on the agenda is that I feel like this is a potential issue that's not going away, and that it's reasonable to project that it's going to become a larger issue and not a smaller issue over time. That is, if you look at the last, 10 years-ish, and you look at the prevalence of cell phone use and cell phone ownership at different age groups, in every age group it's increased, and it continues to increase. And there's certainly no indication from a federal regulatory point of view, that's going to, significantly impact child use and access of cell phones. And I'm glad that it's not that a major issue at elementary, but it sort of begs the question in my mind. Well, why not then just have an explicit policy that bans cell phone use by students at school? Because I'm imagining things as well, like on the bus. I'm imagining things like at lunch and on the playground and other social times, in which some students have cell phones and some don't, and there's mixed ages there. And that's a time where it's obviously not going to interfere with academic impact. But is that something that we want to have available for a number of the reasons that you said, Dr. Morris? Not just for the online content concerns and the social media, but impacts to attention and whatnot. And the other reason is that so with the agenda item before, so we could have talked about this before, but it's a nice Venn diagram overlap. We're going to have a year of our elementary school now that's in a building where most of the kids have their own cell phones, and where cell phone use is a markedly different thing. I mean, I just know from having, and this was a while ago, but I assume it's even more prevalent now. When you have your kids go from elementary school to arms, you suddenly feel more distanced from them, especially if they are going somewhere with their friends after school, and then you're picking them up, right? The rite of passage of the Amherst 7th grader, which now filters down to the 6th grader, right? And so this is one of those impacts. And I think it's reasonable to project that there is going to be increased cell phone use by 6th graders once they're in a building where it's all over the place, and where their older peers are there. And so that's why I feel like now is the time for us to set a policy. And exactly what that policy is TBD, but I think it can be simple, and just in terms of codifying what our current practice is. And then I really would like to get some more direct principal and staff feedback on their experiences, because at school committee we're really projecting about what's happening in classes, in classrooms, in bathrooms, at lunch, on the bus, before school, after school, on the playground. And we don't know exactly where the touch points are that we might be able to improve things with the policy. So that was the real motivation for me wanting to explore this right now.
Mike?
Yeah, I don't have any concerns. If the school committee wants to go that way, I don't think that, I did bring this up with our elementary principals, and it's not an issue now, but it's also not something that, you can predict totally what happens in the future. It's not something we feel really strongly about. And, I don't have much additional input to offer at the elementary level.
Jennifer?
So my thinking is that if it's not a problem right now, if it's not a problem right now, I don't think this is off the top of my head. I don't think we need to address it now if it's not a problem now. That said, I do see Peter's point that cell phone usage is only going to increase, and it's only going to get younger, but it hasn't yet. It hasn't become a problem yet, and we don't really know what the problems are going to be. We can't anticipate or project forward what the problems are going to be, or maybe we can guess what they're going to be, but we don't really know what it will look like when and if K through 5 or K through 6 students, more of them have cell phones in schools. So, and there's so much else for us to do. So my first thought is, I don't feel strongly about needing a policy about this right now. In addition, if we did have a policy for K through 6 on cell phones, I would want it to be different for the 6th graders in the middle school. I don't think that a blanket policy for the elementary school kids at our 3 elementary schools, or 2, should be the same as for 6th graders in the middle school. So those are my thoughts.
I think to a certain extent, I share that same sentiment that we haven't heard that it's a problem. We're not seeing it's a problem, and we have a lot on our plates. So part of me thinks if it's not an issue and our district building leaders are not asking for assistance and partnership in figuring out a solution to a problem, then I'm not sure that that it's an urgent task for our school committee to undertake. And I think a little bit also about just sort of the definition of policy and sort of why we as a school committee formulate policies and the differences between a policy and a handbook, for example, a student or building handbook. And I'm not I don't want to talk about secondary. That's an OML issue, but I do want to sort of reference it as an example. So that's my only point in bringing this up. And if I'm just looking around to make sure that folks are okay with me sort of referencing. So we don't have a cell phone policy for the broader district, and right now the regional committee sort of writes policy for all 3 districts: Amherst, Pelham, and then the secondary region. There isn't a policy, and the cell phone sort of practice is codified in the student handbooks of the individual schools in those districts. And we haven't, and again, in that district, there also isn't a problem with cell phones, at least not one that's sort of that's not manageable in the building level there. So I think that there's plenty of examples. That's just one example, and there's probably other examples of school leadership managing through sort of tricky situations for which there really isn't policy. Policy that's codified and enables the sort of flexibility for the building and the school leadership, frankly, to address situations as they best see fit. If we felt that if we were hearing that this is a rising issue and we really need to be addressing it through policy, that would be a different story. But we're not hearing that, and it from all all reports, our current approaches and our current practices are sufficient in terms of preventing cell phones from disrupting the learning environment and experience in our schools. That's completely separate from, as Mike mentioned, what's happening outside of school, this school day and the school building with cell phone ownership. But we can't write policy for how students interact with social media and cell phones outside of the school day. So we've talked about that and other things in terms of health and wellness and sort of social emotional learning and sort of addressing social media behavior that way, as opposed to addressing the actual use and ownership of cell phones in the school, or I should say ownership and use of cell phones in the school. So sorry for that long-winded take, but for multiple reasons, I also don't feel like the urgency to address this with new policy. Are there other thoughts? Peter?
Yes, I appreciate hearing the multiple perspectives. I mean, I agree with the point that if there was a policy, it should be different for 6th, given the different environment. I guess I'm not compelled by some of the other. I mean, I respect, but I'm not personally compelled by some of the points of that we have a lot to do. I mean, I think if we determine that something needs to be done, then we got through COVID, in the 104 meetings, like over a year. I think if we determine that this is valuable, which is a separate point, but if we determine it's valuable, I don't see this as overwhelming our plate. I also don't think that being proactive is necessarily a bad thing to put into policy. I mean, I understand, the point about we shouldn't go looking for a problem and imagining what it might be and then crafting an imagined solution to it. Certainly that can be taken too far. And so the question is, at what point do you modulate that? On the other hand, we can just wait until it's a problem and then respond to it, which is, I think, what we often do with emergent issues. And so I like the idea of being proactive. And my personal feeling, and maybe out on an island on this, is that I feel like the evolution of technology is accelerating. The integration of cell phones at younger ages is accelerating. And that's something that impacts education and attention. But if the committee doesn't feel like that's that rises to the level of let's now craft a policy at the elementary level, that's fine. You know, I guess I would just ask the superintendent to please keep a proactive eye on it and periodically touch base with principals about emergent issues they're seeing, and then if it comes up at a future time, we can be prepared to react to it. But I appreciate the discussion. So I just want to thank Jennifer and Allison for their comments.
Okay, so moving on, future agenda planning. So right now our next meeting is scheduled for November 15th, but for a couple of reasons, we are planning right now. It looks like we will be able to meet in person by that week in November. But I would love to shift our meeting date from Tuesday night to Thursday night that week. And just wanted to check in with folks whether that can work before we sort of move to actually agenda planning and sort of coordinating with Amherst Media. Are there any objections to moving to Thursday? Irv?
Yeah, I sat on the board of the United Way of Franklin, Hampshire, and Thursday, at least once a month, that meeting occurs on Thursdays.
This would just be a one-time shift. Sorry.
It was only for this one day.
Just that one. Just the week.
That's fine. All right, good enough. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So we would continue as scheduled for the other weeks of the year. So it was just this particular one. Peter?
I'm sorry. Which date was that?
So moving the meeting to November 17th, which is a Thursday.
That works for me.
Okay, great. So right now we have another full schedule or full agenda. So a much more thorough discussion on enrollment, as well as sixth grade to ARMS model presentation. So those two are connected with each other. Oh, I should say, Peter mentioned the joint meeting for the financial indicators, which is November 7th, which I believe is a Monday. So that will be, I don't know if that's a hybrid meeting or in-person meeting. I think it's in person for members of the committee who choose to, but it's also a hybrid opportunity. So that is for, I believe we were all on the committee. No, we weren't. So that is the meeting that the library, school committee, and town council meet together to hear a presentation on sort of anticipated revenue and financial situation of the town for the coming budget year, and traditionally is what kicks off the budget planning process and budget planning cycle for the town committees. We'll that will be on the 7th. If there's anything that coming out of that will warrant a conversation with our committee, so we can have that add that to our November 17th meeting pending time. We'll potentially get an update on the Crocker Farm Cubbies project. If that's ready, if not, then that will be at our December meeting. We'll come back to the cameras in elementary schools, the new elementary school building. In CES vote, I'm not sure what that is. Mike?
CES is Collaborative for Educational Services, and they're asking all of the school committees who are part of them. They have a capital request, not of funds, but of access to their funds, but it requires a vote of the or a certain percentage of the school committees. They have a very lengthy, detailed memo that I'll include in the packet ahead of time. It's already been considered in Pelham and will be considered in a different district that I work for next week. So, sort of, I think all that details will be in there, but it's a capital thing, and based on the bylaws of CES, they have to ask their member districts. So I'm sorry, it's not very articulated in that kind of planning document, but lengthy Word document or PDF for you to consider.
Yep. And one that we had penciled in for this month but didn't get to is the health curriculum related to LGBTQ+. So we continue to pencil that in and need to coordinate with the individuals that we'd like to invite to answer questions. So full schedule. Are there other items that I'm thinking, Mike, that if pending time in that agenda, that would be also a good time to sort of, I mean, regardless of what comes out of the financial indicators, to at least go over and review the timeline for our budget development process. Jennifer?
So I hear you saying it's a packed agenda. I wanted to ask about the application that community members sent to the CPAC regarding funding for the Fort River Fields, and whether the school committee would want to consider hearing about the proposal and possibly like voting to endorse the project, or voting to recommend that CPAC approve or provide funding for that project. It could improve the chances of the application being approved, which would then help the school building project. And I know that obviously there's a school building committee that has their own responsibilities, but I feel like part of this body's responsibility is to do our best to make sure that the debt exclusion override passes. And I think one way to do that is to, if we get these CPAC funds for the fields, that will make the project more appealing to voters and hopefully more likely to have community support. So my question is, can we discuss the CPAC proposal?
Do you mean CPA?
So, sorry, CPA. Yeah, sorry. I'm saying CPAC. I keep saying CPAC. I'm sorry. I don't mean SEPAC. I mean CPAC. Sorry, it's very confusing. That proposal for funding for the fields, can we discuss it and possibly come to a vote to recommend it? Thank you.
Did you have a question, Peter?
I guess I don't mean to be rude. I get concerned when we do agenda planning and then we start to drift into deliberation. I know that, I've done it myself. Yeah, just in terms of scheduling the item and no opinion on it, I have no objection to scheduling the item.
So we can pencil that in pending the time. It might work. I think what would be helpful is to have a school building project update, and understand. So not just sort of that presentation, but understand from the school building perspective, or I'm not sure who, Sean Mangano, like how that can work into the financing, because I just questions on like, what is the debt exclusion, and does endorsing that have any impact on what that debt exclusion is? I don't purport to be sort of a capital financing expert, so I think having a little bit of that perspective might help in sort of understanding how this proposal fits into that. Okay. If there's nothing else, then a warrant report. And I apologize, I only attached the warrants during the meeting tonight, so they weren't there ahead of time, but there's 3, so I will read them. I, Allison McDonald, approve payroll in the amount of $746,238.72 dated October 5th, 2022, and I signed that on October 5th, 2022. I, Allison McDonald, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $235,140.60 for a warrant dated September 26, 2022. This includes general fund expenses of $138,420.80, revolving fund expenses of $50,997.41, grant fund expenses of $45,075.31, ESSER funds of $330, miscellaneous of $81.48, and a gift of $235.60. And I signed that on September 29th, 2022. And I also authorized payroll in the amount of $772,585.28 dated September 21st, 2022. And I signed that on September 23rd, 2022. And that is all. Next up is gifts. We don't have any gifts tonight to accept. So 10 minutes early. I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Allison, seconded by Jennifer, and we'll take a roll call vote. Ben?
Ben, I.
Irv? Irv? Peter?
Peter, I.
Jennifer?
Jennifer, I.
Allison, I. Irv?
Irv, I finally got it.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Cursor was done.